Well, the Filipino community in the United States is also taking part in this historic day. After all, whoever gets to sit in the White House will chart the course of U.S. Philippine relations. To help us understand the impact of the elections on our country, we're joined now by the former ambassador to the United States, Jose Cuisa Jr. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us. Almost 2 million Filipinos in the United States are eligible to vote today. How influential are Filipino Americans as a voting bloc in various states?
Well, the Filipino Americans are divided when it comes to voting. In the 2016 elections, 72% of them claimed that they voted for Hillary Clinton, whereas 27% of them said they voted for Donald Trump. In the latest survey, I think this was done in October, 52% of the registered Filipino-American voters said that they would vote for Joe Biden, whereas only 34% of them said that they would vote for Donald Trump. So it's quite a large margin in favor of Joe Biden.
But, Ambassador, according to a recent 2020 Asian American voter survey, Filipino-American voters are still going for U.S. President Donald Trump despite his pandemic response and controversial anti-immigrant statements and policies. Is it because Filipino-Americans, many of them have basically conservative values, which is among the reasons for their supporting Trump?
Well, yes, they are. Most of them would be Republicans in terms of their values. But again, when it comes to elections, apparently they go to the other side, as seen in 2016. Now, in many of the states, like, for example, New York and California, where you have the majority of Filipino Americans, they tend to be more liberal. So they are mostly Democratic voters, whereas in the more conservative states, you see the Filipino Americans tend to be Republicans. No?
Because if you take a look at the Democratic Party, they basically support civil rights, immigration, and climate change, and health insurance. And this favors a lot of Filipino Americans in the United States, rather than the Republicans who are for gun rights and tighter restrictions on immigration.
Right. The younger, particularly the younger Filipino Americans, tend to be Democrats or Democratic because they are in favor of immigration, especially the DACA program, which the Democrats have supported, whereas Trump has been against the DACA program. A lot of young Filipino immigrants will, of course, be affected if Trump continues to push for the stoppage of that DACA program. And I think in terms of, again, healthcare, the Democrats tend to be more liberal in terms of the coverage for immigrants, whereas Trump is a lot more restrictive in his plan to cover immigrants. Huh?
So let's take a look at President Trump and Joe Biden. Whoever becomes the next president of the United States, what will this mean, Ambassador, for RP-US relations?
Okay, in terms of the alliance, whoever wins, whether it's Biden or Trump, that will remain. And I think if Biden were to win, he would like to strengthen the alliance with the Philippines in terms of building up the capability of the armed forces. That was really part of the Pivot to Asia program of Barack Obama, which was, of course, supported by Joe Biden. Now, however, on the other hand, the Democrats, especially if they control the Senate, they're going to be looking at the human rights record of the Philippines. So a number of Democratic senators have already criticized the Philippines for its human rights record. So we'll have to see how that pans out. But In terms of trade, Joe Biden believes in multilateral trade, so that will be good for the Philippines. It's very possible that he may bring back the U.S. into the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and that would be good for Asia, because I think the idea is to try to expand that coalition of about 11 countries, 12 of course including the U.S., to a larger bloc. So that will be good for the Philippines. Now, in the case, if it were Trump, he has been very friendly with President Duterte. He has ignored all the criticisms of the human rights organizations, both in the U.S. and in the Philippines, about the violations of human rights. He has continued to support the Philippines, as we have seen from the last 3.5 years. The kind of assistance that we have gotten from the U.S. government has been quite substantial, despite the clear bias of President Duterte towards China. But Trump apparently has ignored that and has developed a good relationship with President Duterte. So I think either way, I think the Philippines will not be negatively impacted, except precisely in the area of human rights. I think that's where we may have some challenges.
Thank you so much for your insights, Ambassador Jose Cuisa Jr., former Philippine ambassador to Washington.